a tweet that I had received from Donovan Hernandez. I love that lovely Twitter name. So he had said that I give up on smacss. It only made it harder for me to think, and it got to the point where important couldn't save me. So let's take a look at the design that he had worked on so far. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. We have some buttons on the left here, some buttons on the right here. We have a drop-down menu that would appear. And we have a logo, which admittedly has taken me a while to respond to. So he's obviously continued work, and I don't have that logo anymore. But I think everything that I'm going to talk about today, we can actually do without needing that logo for now. So let's take a look at the code that he has so far. And so here we have this lovely CSS. We can see a clear fix, obviously a very common solution to clearing floats. We have a couple global styles. In this case, he is removing margin and padding from all elements as sort of a global reset. I tend to recommend against resets in general, and this one in particular, especially if you're going to have form elements, because having the margin and padding like this can actually affect form elements. Again, depends on the kind of design you have and how relevant that is. I tend to want to focus specifically on the issues that need to be addressed. Anyway, we have this lovely body tag with a background gradient. I'll mention here, with bodies and backgrounds, it's always really important to specify your background color fallbacks, as well as your foreground colors that you would expect to see on the page. And we can kind of see a little bit of that coming further in, where things like text color. So for example, here down in the navigation, he's specifying the font color to apply to all links within the navigation, which is okay. But if we look at the actual design here, we can see that, all these are links, but we have white text on a blue background. And if we look at this body area, we can kind of expect, is it going to be white text on a blue background? Some of this stuff we might be able to actually set at a more global level, as opposed to being as specific as saying color should be applied only on these buttons within navigation, which is a lot more specific than I think we want to be. So going back to the code here, let's kind of skip through and see here. Okay, so we've got our navigation structure. We've got primary navigation, secondary navigation. In this case here, we're just setting some background colors. It looks like he had commented out, or maybe that was an error as far as the bottom border, along with setting a height. This is a fixed height, which considering we're clearing the floats, I'm not sure how necessary it would be to specify the height there. We have our logo, which he's floating off to the left, and then a margin top to set that out from the top of the page. We've got our login section, which is floated over to the right. We have a drop-down menu that he's begun to style here, and again, this is where he started getting into this. I need to just throw important at everything because I needed to override stuff, and we'll begin to see why in a second. So once we get into the navigations, you can see here, this is what's actually styling the navigation, the stuff on the left, stuff on the right, and he's saying that every link should be display block, padding, and so on. And this is stuff that he's actually trying to now overwrite here. This is sort of deeper level of specificity, which is obviously a more problematic issue. So now we go into the intersection, which just again seems to be more of a layout thing, and then we look at the HTML. So as you can say, with the HTML, we've got our primary navigation up at the top, and we've got our secondary navigation below that. We have our logo, we have our drop-down menu that is part of my account. So again, if the user clicks on my account, and then if we look down here, we have our other navigation. So there's a couple things, the way I try to approach my naming convention is so that I understand what's going on. And looking at the smacss naming convention that I've outlined, I didn't say these were hard and fast rules, but I do think those naming conventions help. So nothing here says to me that it's a layout that is separated from state, that is separated from an actual specific module. Everything here just kind of looks like it's a module to me. So there's really not a whole lot of separation. Whereas if I look at something like intersection is probably a layout that I know that is going to be layout based. Then maybe what I want to do is actually probably change that to something that is a little bit more relevant. So if I change that to, so if you look at the actual smacss.com code, you can actually see that I use this naming convention, L-constrained. So in other words, it's a constrained layout because it's sitting inside a larger layout, but we only want it to have a certain fixed width. So if we, again, just hop back over to smacss.com, it follows a very similar structure. Again, we have these levels or bands of content, and then within them is a constrained layout. Again, naming convention can be whatever you want, but it's still the same type of idea. And so having the L indicates that, yes, it is, this is a layout within the stuff that we want here. So you have to pardon my typos as I go, because obviously I'm live coding this live, as in I'm doing it while I'm doing this demo. Okay, so that's one small change that I've done so far. Pretty minor up until now. But we can see where he's running into the actual problem. The actual problem here is, he's got this navigation that needs to be styled in a particular way. So let's go back to the navigation. We can see that the look and feel of this, we've got these buttons over here, we've got these buttons over here that are essentially the same look and feel. The only thing that differs between them is the color of the buttons. And there are two different ways that we can approach this. We can say that each individual item is a module. It is something that should look and feel a certain way. And if you can imagine the rest of this design, maybe he has these buttons throughout the entire site. So one way that we could actually solve this problem is go through and say, okay, well, for this, we're going to say this is a button. In here, we can say this is a button. And we would do this for every single item. So the thing that tends to scare people away from this particular approach is the fact that, well, okay, I'm adding class names to a lot of stuff on the page. Why can't I take advantage of the cascade or the inheritance rather, in order to take advantage of being able to style these things without having to apply a class to every single item, which is obviously what he was trying to do. We have this navigation here on the top that we can use to say that every button in here is going to look exactly the same, and absolutely we can take advantage of that. So if we're going to say that everything is in here, the problem is that we need to constrain it to exactly what's relevant. So for example, the problem that he's having here is he's having to override a whole bunch of stuff for the drop down, because anything that is applied to the navigation is trying to apply to all these links down below. But really, it only applies to this right here. This is the only thing that we're trying to style. We're not trying to style any of that. So the quickest way to do that is using child selectors. Now, obviously, child selectors, we have to worry about browser support. This is going to be IE7 and up only. So if you do have to worry about IE6, this isn't going to be the best solution, in which case you may want to go back to actually applying buttons to everything. If you can use the child selector, boom, right here, this alone, we've actually managed to solve our problem. And the problem is that now we've solved it by targeting these specific elements. We said that this link is under this LI, is under this UL. Very specific. I don't love this solution because it is, again, tying this very tightly. But if this is the only place where this navigation is going to look and feel like this, we can get away with it. And part of web design is about making these decisions. When you're developing the front end for your site, you're deciding where to apply classes and CSS. These are the kind of decisions that you have to make, and you can go either way on this. So in this case, I'm going to take what he has and kind of follow that approach. Now we have this margin left and the margin right, and all he's really trying to do is he's trying to manage that the margin is in a particular way so that the items here, so for example the navigation lines up here and the navigation lines up here, but that the spacing is consistent between all of them. We can kind of take advantage of this a little bit in the sense that why don't we say that all navigation should have the margin left at 10 pixels. Pardon my typos again. In this case, we're going to just say that the navigation, it's the first child that we now need to remove the margin for, so that we can have everything line up properly. So in this case, you know, we would no longer need this, and we would no longer need this. So just like that, we've managed to remove some CSS from the page, which is fantastic, and remove those class names from the HTML. So already we've simplified things in order to get this thing to work and look properly. So if we go back to the design and we refresh the page, excellent. You know, our buttons are doing exactly what they want. And here's the lovely thing here that is a little bit subtle. Yeah, these things are no longer styled the way they're supposed to be, but that's because that's good. You know, we're saying that the navigation should only apply to these items. And so now we can specify those things separately. So some of the things I would say is, okay, well, the link color and the font changes that he's got here. So obviously he's applying the font at a very micro level, which again I don't love. So what I would say is okay, let's take some of these elements here and actually apply them on the body, because I think this is really where things are supposed to be for his page. And we'll get that the font color, font family. Excellent. And again, I don't love the fact that he's applying everything on one line, only because, again, working with a team, and you can see already just on that one element how things are starting to run off the page. And if we started getting in a lot more CSS3, that would really, I think, tend to mess up and make it a little bit more difficult to understand where things are happening on that page. Okay, so now that I've made those changes, we have a couple things, like our list item here had the list style of none that we would want to get rid of. So hey, things are looking pretty good. These links in particular, again, we have the text decoration, and we can go to text decoration on the links, make sure I'm putting it in the right place, and voila. So we now have exactly what he had before. So this is fantastic. You know, we've simplified things, but here's the best part. All of these importance that he had in here, we can actually get rid of those because we don't need those anymore. We don't need to specify important, because everything on the page works. Obviously it didn't work, so obviously I messed something up. Say this navigation broke now, so let's go back to the code, and we can see that we've got this login stuff here. And the problem with the login is that, one, it's ID based, and he's styling links and the UL on this based on these IDs. So you can see why he had important all over the place, because he needed it to override all these styles. So for example, here we're changing the background color of all the links in there, and so the problem is that it's applying it to the drop down, because all the links there we're expanding out, so we actually don't need that anymore, and we're just going to take that color as well, and we're going to apply it. The background is actually like a separate style, so we're going to actually create a new class here called navigation primary. You can name it whenever you want. If you wanted to just say like navigation lighter, and again, we're just styling the link colors here, so we're just changing the background colors, and we're going to apply that to the primary navigation. So this is our navigation primary. So again, naming convention is, I believe, is very important. So in this case, we're saying that yes, this is a regular navigation. It's going to take all the styles of a navigation, but we're going to override these a little bit by saying that navigation primary will be a little bit different. In this case, it's going to have a slightly different background color on those particular links. Everything else should remain exactly the same. So we shouldn't be needing to style the login. We shouldn't need to be styling the UL. In this case, you know, he's trying to style the drop down, So because of that, what we actually want to do is go in here and say, okay, that should be like that. So if we go back and we refresh, we can see, okay, well, the drop down is correct, but now our list items are not. Okay, well, why aren't our list items correct? So if we go back, we can see, well, we've got a height of 50 on the primary navigation, but we've got a line height. So he's trying to use line height to affect the height of this box. So he had lined those up, and that's why that link was the way it was, and it was why he was overriding a whole bunch of different styles. In this case, we don't actually need that particular thing. We don't need that particular thing either. In this case, the padding is what would actually work here. So we can just say apply those things, and voila, we now have those two particular items styling correctly. Our height's a little bit off, which I can take a look at in just a second. Oh, it's that height because of the height that I have here, of course, is going to override everything else. Hey, look at that. It's pretty much where it is. We have some positioning with the menu, but otherwise, everything else is pretty much exactly the way it was. And so if we take a look at what we had, well, one, we've got this primary navigation, the secondary navigation that have these paddings applied to them. We're kind of duplicating that. In this case, I would actually probably move those to L constrained, since they both have them. And I'm just going to clean up a little bit of the formatting here so it's a little bit easier to see, and we're going to strip that out there, make sure it still works. And I missed something because this does not have the float containment on it. So float containment, the one I actually tend to use when it comes to float containment is overflow. I can see why he's used the clear fix, because he's got the menu appearing and he doesn't want that to overflow in here, in which case I would probably actually just move the clear fix. Obviously make sure the space is in there correctly. Excellent. And did I fix it? Hey, I did. Awesome. And in fact, we actually fixed some of the alignment here as well, which is nice. So you can see with these changes that I made, I've actually simplified a lot of the CSS. I've moved things that are more global to where they should be at the global level. I removed a whole bunch of stuff that had to do with the login that didn't need to be there. Anything that was specific to the dropdown is now specific to the dropdown. And the navigation, anything that styles the navigation is now specific to the navigation. And as you can see here, I didn't really change things too much. I removed a class off of here. I basically renamed the margin left that was there to navigation primary, and only to change the look and feel of the buttons themselves. And otherwise, this is pretty close to what he had, but we've managed to simplify things. I removed all the importance, and I actually managed to reduce a lot of the CSS that was in here. So these are a whole bunch of different concepts within smacss that I really wanted to sort of reiterate. Is we're trying to make sure that when we set up particular styles, that they're only affecting the CSS that we cared about. The problem that he was having is that he had the login classes were actually affecting all the links and all the list items inside of it. He had navigation that was affecting all the links and all the list items in it, and he had the drop down that was trying to do. So he had three different styles, three different classes that were all fighting to style these list items and these link colors, which is really where a lot of the problems we're running into. Once we start specifying things in a much more modular fashion, where the classes are only styling the elements that are relevant to it, we definitely simplify things. So again, going back to that login example, sort of that depth of applicability that we talk about, it's way up here at the UL, but it was styling things way down here. It's from the A to the LI to the UL to the A to the LI to the UL. This is a huge sort of link between those two things, where we're styling something way up high and it's affecting something way down low. By simplifying that so things aren't affecting anything beyond like two levels, we've definitely made it a lot simpler. So the navigation, we say it's only going to affect within two levels using the child selector. fantastic. The drop down, we're relying in this case on the HTML structure being simple. In this case, that it is the UL, LIL, and the link, and it's not really going to change. And as a result of that we keep this sort of simple structure. If we started adding a lot more stuff in here, that let's say drop downs could also have drop downs that needed to be styled differently, then maybe we would actually go to a point where we add child selectors here to make sure that they're styling stuff a little bit more specifically. So with that said, I want to thank lovely Donovan here for his tweet. And hopefully you've enjoyed this and have learned a little bit about why I've kind of come up with the concepts that I have and how they can be applied to a project. Thank you very much.